Welcome to the road to resilience, an inspiring tale of courage, loss, and newfound purpose. When Amy's life is upended by a tragic accident and betrayal from someone she trusted, she faces the daunting task of rebuilding herself from the ground up. Supported by friends and a tight-knit community, she transforms her personal struggle into a mission to help others, founding Hope Haven, a center that becomes a beacon of healing and strength. But as Hope Haven flourishes, Amy confronts unexpected challenges and the shadows of her past, testing her resolve and determination. Can she keep moving forward when new trials emerge and old wounds threaten to reopen? Dive into this story of resilience and discover the power of hope and second chances. If this journey speaks to you, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of overcoming and triumph. Let's get started. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Amy Callahan's office, casting golden rays over the meticulously curated decor. Her boutique, Silken Threads, was nestled in the bustling heart of the city, known for its luxurious apparel and personalized service. Amy had built it from the ground up, transforming a small consignment shop into a chain of fashion boutiques that drew a loyal clientele. Amy glanced at the framed photos on her desk, her ribbon-cutting ceremony for the flagship store, an article featuring her as a local business leader, and a picture of her with her husband, Mark, taken during their last vacation to the coast. The smile in that photo was different from the ones in her professional shots, less posed, more genuine. But looking at it now, she felt an unease she couldn't quite name. "Big day today, boss?" Caroline, her assistant manager, poked her head through the doorway with a grin. Amy nodded, pushing away the flicker of doubt. "Investor meeting at noon. It's going to be a turning point for us." The boutique hummed with energy as customers strolled through aisles and cash registers chimed with sales. The familiar sounds bolstered Amy's confidence, reminding her of what she had accomplished and what she had yet to conquer. Amy's day had gone as planned, until she found herself driving down the highway, mentally rehearsing her pitch. The traffic was light, and she allowed herself a brief moment to adjust the radio, searching for her favorite station to cut through her nerves. Just as she settled on a song, a metallic blur appeared in her peripheral vision. A truck, out of control, and veering directly into her lane. Time slowed to a crawl. Amy's heart slammed in her chest as she wrenched the steering wheel to avoid the collision. The car skidded and flipped, the shriek of twisting metal and shattered glass piercing her consciousness. Then darkness. When she came to, voices surrounded her. Paramedics worked swiftly, their faces focused as they secured her to a stretcher. Every breath sent daggers of pain through her ribs, and the numbness in her legs filled her with icy dread. "Can you hear me?" "You're going to be okay," a voice said, but it felt distant, as if she were hearing it through a long tunnel. The world around her blurred and dimmed as unconsciousness swept over her again. Days in the hospital were a haze of painkillers, surgeries, and doctors' discussions that seemed to happen just out of her comprehension. When the fog of sedation lifted enough for Amy to process what was being said, she wished it hadn't. "Severe spinal trauma." The doctor's words were clear now, sharper than any scalpel. "There's a significant possibility you won't regain mobility below the waist." Mark sat beside her bed, his face ashen and unreadable. His hand rested on hers, but it felt mechanical, a gesture performed out of duty rather than love. Amy searched his eyes for reassurance, for the steadiness that had been there before. Instead, she saw fear, and beneath it, something worse: resignation. "It's going to be okay, Amy. We'll get through this," he stammered, but the hollow tone betrayed him. For the first time, Amy realized that the road ahead would be hers to navigate, alone if necessary. The days turned into weeks. Amy remained in the sterile hospital room, surrounded by beeping monitors and the low murmur of nurses passing by. Mark's visits grew less frequent, and when he was there, silence filled the spaces between them. Conversations were limited to updates from the doctors, polite questions about her comfort, and forced attempts at normalcy. Rachel, Amy's best friend since college, showed up daily, bringing light into the bleak room. Her laughter, stories, and relentless optimism were the only reminders of who Amy had been before the accident. One afternoon, Rachel brought her a journal, its cover a deep blue, the color of the ocean Amy had loved. "I know it's hard," Rachel said, sitting at the edge of Amy's bed. "But writing might help you sort through everything." Amy nodded, the tightness in her throat preventing her from speaking. She opened the journal that night, pen hovering over the first page before she scribbled the words, "Who am I now?" The doctor's prognosis was delivered without ceremony. "We've done all we can, Amy. While there may be some improvement with intensive therapy, walking again is unlikely." Each word landed like a punch, driving home a reality that left no room for denial. Mark's reaction was muted. He stared at his phone more than he looked at her. Amy sensed it before he said anything. His detachment had grown, fueled by his inability to face what their future would look like now. That evening, he stood by the window, his silhouette stiff against the city lights. "I think we need to talk," he began, his voice strained. "About what this means for us." Amy's heart sank. She knew this conversation was inevitable, yet she'd clung to the hope that he'd surprise her, that his promises of love would outweigh the fear. But his eyes told her everything before his words could. "I don't know if I can do this," Mark said finally. "I need time to think." The silence in their apartment was suffocating. Mark had packed a bag the night before, his footsteps a heavy echo as he moved around their shared space. The note he left on the kitchen counter was short, impersonal, a confirmation of what Amy had felt since the accident. "I need time to figure things out. I'll be in touch." Amy stared at the empty hallway, the shadows long and dark in the evening light. The absence of Mark's presence brought both pain and clarity. She was alone, facing an uncertain future with a body that no longer felt like her own. Rachel arrived within hours, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Mark's abandoned suitcase in the corner. "Good riddance," she said, softening her words with a hand on Amy's shoulder. "You don't need someone who only stands by you when it's easy." Amy didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze to the journal Rachel had given her, its pages still mostly blank. With shaking hands, she wrote, "I am still here, even if he isn't." Life in the nursing home was a stark contrast to the bustling days at her boutique. The sterile smell of antiseptic, the quiet shuffling of residents, and the clinical efficiency of the staff made Amy feel like a shadow of who she used to be. The staff, while kind, were strangers, their smiles fleeting and professional. Physical therapy sessions were grueling. Each day, she pushed herself, her muscles straining as she willed her legs to move. The therapists encouraged her with well-meaning platitudes. "One day at a time, Amy." But each session left her exhausted and questioning whether her efforts would ever lead to progress. Rachel visited often, breaking the monotony with stories about their college days and updates on friends. She brought color into the room. Magazines, flowers, and once, an old photo album filled with memories of carefree times. "Do you remember this?" Rachel pointed at a photo of them at the beach, laughing as a wave splashed over them. Amy's heart ached with the reminder of simpler days, but a flicker of determination sparked within her. "Maybe I can still find a way to feel that joy again," Amy said softly, more to herself than Rachel. One afternoon, while staring at the bare tree branches outside her window, a knock at the door broke Amy's reverie. In walked Laura, a nurse she had seen but never really spoken to. "I thought you might like some company," Laura said, placing a small hand-knitted blanket over Amy's lap. "I made this during my breaks. Helps me unwind." The simple act of kindness touched Amy in a way she hadn't expected. They talked for hours that day, about Laura's 2 sons, about the patients who had come and gone, and eventually about Amy's life before the accident. "I used to run a boutique," Amy said, a small smile breaking through. "I loved creating something that made people feel beautiful." Laura's eyes lit up. "And you can still do that, you know. Just because you're here now doesn't mean that part of you is gone." The days grew a little easier as Amy settled into a routine. Morning therapy was followed by visits to the common room, where she watched the residents play games and share stories. At first, she felt like an outsider, unable to connect with their simple joy. But slowly, she began to engage, sharing a laugh over a misplayed hand of cards, or offering a compliment to someone who had dressed up for the day. Rachel and Laura became her lifelines, Together they talked about what the future might look like, each conversation planting the idea that maybe Amy could still make a difference. Rachel, always practical and full of ideas, suggested that Amy consider ways to use her business experience. "You've got a mind for this, Amy. You know how to build things up from scratch," Rachel said one afternoon. "Maybe you could start something here, something for people who need more than just therapy." Amy's mind whirred with possibilities, and for the first time in months, she felt a spark of purpose. Amy couldn't shake Rachel's words. That night, she flipped open her journal, its pages now filled with observations, frustrations, and small triumphs. This time she wrote with a new focus. What if I built a place where people like me could rediscover themselves? A space for hope, not just survival. The thought became an obsession. During quiet moments, she sketched layouts of rooms designed for comfort and community. Therapy spaces where patients could be supported and seen. The name came to her suddenly, as if it had been waiting. Hope Haven. The next morning, she showed Rachel and Laura the sketches. Rachel's eyes widened with excitement. "Amy, this is it. This is what you're meant to do." Laura nodded, a smile breaking through her usually calm demeanor. "And I know people who would be on board with this. This town needs something like Hope Haven." For the first time in a long while, Amy felt like she was standing at the edge of something bigger than her pain. A new beginning forged from the fragments of her old life. Amy's sketches for Hope Haven quickly turned into late-night brainstorming sessions with Rachel and Laura. They huddled in Amy's room, papers spread out like a blueprint of possibility. Each idea sparked new questions. How would they fund it? Where would it be? Who could help? Laura suggested reaching out to the town's mayor, George Wallace, a respected figure known for supporting local projects. Amy hesitated at first. Approaching someone in power felt daunting. But Rachel insisted. "Amy, you built a business from scratch. You know how to persuade people. George needs to see that this isn't just for you. It's for the whole community." Amy's fingers tightened around her pen as she wrote a list of talking points. She felt the familiar stir of nerves, not unlike the days when she prepared pitches for investors. This time, though, the stakes were deeply personal. Amy, Rachel, and Laura arranged to meet George at Town Hall. The building was modest, its brick exterior weathered by decades of town meetings and local events. Amy's heart thudded in her chest as they stepped into his office, decorated with awards and framed newspaper articles from past projects. George was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and a smile that hinted at curiosity. He listened intently as Amy outlined her vision for Hope Haven, occasionally nodding and taking notes. "This is an ambitious plan, Amy," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I can see the value in it. Our town needs a space like this. If you can gather enough initial support, I'll back you with the permits and connect you with local donors." Relief washed over Amy. The path ahead was uncertain, but she had taken the first step. Amy and Rachel set out to gather support. They spoke at local meetings, shared Amy's story in small gatherings at the library, and distributed flyers. Laura's connections within the medical community proved invaluable. Therapists and nurses volunteered to help in any way they could. At first, the response was cautious. People whispered about Amy's past and wondered if she was strong enough to take on such a challenge. But gradually, her sincerity and the clear passion in her voice won them over. One evening, after Amy spoke at a community center event, an older man approached her. "My wife struggled after her accident. We didn't have a place like this. I'd like to help," he said, pressing a check into her hand. Tears welled in Amy's eyes as she thanked him, her gratitude spilling out in words that felt inadequate. With initial funding secured, the first signs of construction began on a vacant lot on the outskirts of town. Amy felt a mix of exhilaration and fear as she watched workers measure out the space and set up the foundation. Each day she visited the site, often accompanied by Rachel and Laura, who kept her spirits high and helped with decisions. Ben, the carpenter she had befriended at the nursing home, volunteered his time. His presence became a source of steady encouragement, especially on days when setbacks, delayed shipments, unexpected expenses threatened to dampen Amy's hope. One afternoon, Ben found Amy staring at the half-finished structure, worry etched into her features. "You're doing something amazing, you know," he said, leaning on his tool belt. "It's going to be worth every headache." Amy managed to smile, feeling a warmth spread through her. "Thanks, Ben. Sometimes I just need to hear that." Construction was not without its problems. A key supplier ran into financial trouble, causing a delay in shipments. The sudden gap in materials threatened to halt progress, and the growing expenses strained their limited budget. Amy spent sleepless nights calculating costs and brainstorming ways to keep the project on track. Rachel, ever practical, suggested hosting a fundraising event. "People need to see what this means to you, Amy. Let them invest not just money but hope." Within days, they organized a community event at the town square. Volunteers set up booths, sold baked goods, and displayed drawings of the future Hope Haven. Amy took the stage, her voice shaking at first but gaining strength as she spoke about why she started this journey and what the center would mean for those in need. The event raised more than expected, and donations came not just from wealthier patrons, but from townspeople who contributed what they could. It was a testament to how deeply Hope Haven had already begun to embed itself in the fabric of their community. The walls of Hope Haven began to rise, framed by the hands of volunteers and professional builders alike. Amy felt a deep sense of fulfillment watching the space take shape. The therapy rooms, the open areas designed for group activities, and the cozy corners meant for rest and reflection. Laura's experience informed the design of spaces dedicated to patient care, while Rachel ensured the budget stayed intact. Ben's craftsmanship showed in the little details, the handcrafted benches in the lobby and the sturdy railings he built himself. "These are going to last," he said, running his fingers along the polished wood. Amy saw in those details not just practicality, but care. During breaks, Ben and Amy shared stories and laughter. Their friendship began to tiptoe toward something deeper, with lingering glances and shared silences that spoke more than words. As the building neared completion, Amy's exhaustion reached a peak. The constant pressure, the weight of responsibility, and her own physical limits pressed on her. One night, she sat alone in the nearly finished therapy room, shadows cast long by the moonlight seeping through the windows. Rachel found her there, silent and brooding. "What's going on, Amy? You've worked so hard, but lately it's like you're not here." Amy exhaled shakily. "What if I fail? What if, after all this, it's not enough?" Rachel sat beside her, taking her hand. "Then we rebuild, just like we've been doing all along. But I don't think you'll need to, because you've already done more than most people could imagine." Amy's doubt receded, leaving room for the stubborn determination that had carried her this far. The day the final nail was driven into the framework, Hope Haven stood complete, a beacon of promise. Volunteers gathered to admire their work, and for the first time, Amy allowed herself to truly see it, not just as a collection of rooms and walls, but as the embodiment of everyone's belief in what could be. Laura organized a walkthrough, inviting medical professionals from the town to tour the facility. Their positive feedback bolstered Amy's confidence, and a few committed to volunteering part-time to support the center's services. Ben joined her on the front steps as the sun set, casting the building in a warm, golden glow. "Ready for the next step?" he asked, eyes filled with the quiet understanding they had built between them. Amy looked out at the horizon, then at the center that had grown from a fragile dream into reality. "More than ever," she said, feeling a sense of completion she hadn't thought possible. The air buzzed with excitement on the day of Hope Haven's grand opening. Balloons in soft blues and greens, colors chosen to represent healing and growth, framed the entrance. The town gathered in front of the new center, their chatter mingling with the gentle strains of a local string quartet. Rachel stood by Amy's side, offering her an encouraging squeeze of the hand. Amy took a deep breath as she rolled up to the podium, her palms damp with nerves. She scanned the crowd, catching sight of familiar faces: Laura, Ben, George the mayor, and patients who had come to share this milestone. "Thank you all for being here today," Amy began, her voice wavering before she steadied it. "Hope Haven was born from a time when I thought I'd lost everything. But with the love and support of this community, what began as a personal journey has grown into a space where we can all come together to find strength and hope." Applause rose, and for the first time in a long while Amy felt the sharp edge of her past soften. Within days of opening, Hope Haven was filled with the sound of conversations and movement. Patients arrived for assessments, each bringing their own story of resilience and struggle. One of the first was Jamie, a 10-year-old boy with a bright smile and an unyielding spirit despite being paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident. Amy met him on his first day as he was wheeled in by his mother. "Welcome, Jamie. We're going to make sure you have everything you need here," she said, offering a smile that matched his. As Jamie joined a physical therapy session, Laura, who oversaw his intake, remarked to Amy, "This place already feels like it's been here forever." Amy watched Jamie laugh with the therapist as they played a simple game of catch. Hope Haven was alive, not just with activity, but with the belief that progress was possible. Running the center was more demanding than Amy had anticipated. While the initial days brimmed with hope and excitement, the practicalities of scheduling, funding, and ensuring quality care loomed large. Laura juggled patient care with administrative work, while Rachel kept the staff coordinated, handling everything from supply orders to community outreach. One afternoon, Rachel burst into Amy's office with an exasperated look. "We've run into a snag. Insurance claims are backlogged, and we need to find a way to cover costs until they process." Amy rubbed her temples, the stress gnawing at her. "We'll figure it out, Rachie. Let's host another community night. Something that brings in donations and gets the word out even more." "Like a showcase?" Rachel's face brightened. "A night where patients share their stories? That could work." The idea evolved into a plan that would strengthen Hope Haven's profile and remind the community why it mattered. The showcase was set up in the therapy room, which had been transformed with twinkling lights and rows of chairs. Amy felt a mix of pride and anxiety as she watched the guests arrive. Ben, who had volunteered to set up the sound equipment, gave her a thumbs up from across the room. The evening began with stories from patients who bravely shared their journeys. Jamie spoke, his voice small but sure, about how Hope Haven had given him more than just therapy. It had given him friends and a place where he felt seen. The room erupted into applause, some guests wiping away tears. Rachel leaned into Amy, whispering, "This was exactly what we needed." Amy nodded, the warmth of gratitude blooming in her chest. The showcase not only bolstered the center's funds, but deepened the community's connection to its mission. Hope Haven's success began attracting more attention. While most of it was positive, one morning Amy received an anonymous letter that sent a chill down her spine. It accused the center of misusing funds and hinted at an investigation. The timing couldn't have been worse, as Amy had just secured meetings with potential donors for expansion. She called a meeting with Rachel and George, the mayor. "This letter could hurt us if it gains traction," Amy said, her voice steady despite the nerves she felt. George examined the letter, frowning. "It's baseless, but we'll need to show transparency. The town trusts you, Amy, but it wouldn't hurt to hold a public meeting to address any doubts." As the meeting ended, Ben found her in the hallway. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern softening his voice. "I will be," Amy said, drawing strength from his presence. "I have to be." Word of the anonymous letter spread, but so did support for Hope Haven. The center's patients and their families shared testimonials on social media and in town hall meetings. Rachel organized a Quanda session, inviting the public to come and voice any concerns. On the day of the session, the room was packed. Amy sat at the front, Laura and Rachel beside her, as George opened the floor for questions. A few tense moments passed, with murmurs from the back of the room. Then, Jamie's mother stood up. "This center gave my son hope. It's given our family a reason to believe that recovery is possible. We support Hope Haven because we see what it's doing every single day." The room erupted in applause, and Amy's eyes brimmed with tears. The community's belief in her vision solidified her determination. The investigation never materialized, and the anonymous threat faded away, overshadowed by the town's outpouring of trust. The Conda session had an unexpected result. New partnerships and volunteers emerged, wanting to be a part of Hope Haven's mission. The center's waiting list grew, prompting Amy and the team to discuss expanding services. Rachel looked up from her notes during one of their meetings. "We need more staff, especially if we're going to handle this demand." Ben offered to help source local artisans and carpenters to create new therapy tools. while Laura suggested training programs to fast-track volunteers into more permanent roles. The next weeks were a whirlwind of training, interviews, and onboarding new team members. Amy marveled at the way the center evolved with every new set of hands and ideas. Hope Haven was no longer just her dream. It was a collective effort powered by people who believed in the same vision. One evening, just as the day was winding down, the sound of the front door opening caught Amy's attention. She turned to see a man she hadn't laid eyes on in over a year. Mark. He looked older, his once confident posture now subdued. "Amy," he began, searching her face. "I heard about what you've done here. It's incredible." Amy's pulse quickened, old emotions stirring. "Why are you here, Mark?" "I wanted to see it for myself." "To see you?" He took a tentative step forward. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I wanted to apologize." The room felt smaller, the past pressing in. "Thank you for saying that," Amy replied, her voice cool but composed. "But I've moved forward, and so has this center." Mark nodded, eyes shadowed with regret. Without another word, he turned and left, leaving Amy standing in the quiet hall, relieved yet reflective. The encounter with Mark left Amy unsettled, but it also reaffirmed the choices she'd made. She sat with Ben in the garden that evening, the scent of late-blooming flowers around them. "You okay?" Ben asked, handing her a cup of tea. "I think so," Amy said, staring at the moon's reflection in the pond. "It's strange how facing your past can make you see the present more clearly." Ben's hand found hers, a reassuring presence. "The past is just one chapter, Amy. Look at everything you've written since then." Amy leaned into his warmth, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known she needed. Hope Haven was thriving, and so was she. Hope Haven's positive reputation spread to nearby towns, drawing attention from regional health boards and community leaders interested in replicating its success. Amy received an email from Dr. Lydia Monroe, a well-known advocate for rehabilitative care, who wanted to discuss collaborating on an expansion that would reach underserved areas. Rachel was the first to see the message and rushed to Amy's office, eyes wide with excitement. "Amy, this could change everything. We're not just talking about local impact anymore. This is regional." Amy read through the email, her mind racing with possibilities. The idea of expanding Hope Haven had always been in the back of her mind, but seeing it laid out by someone as influential as Dr. Monroe made it feel real. "Let's set up a meeting," Amy said, determination hardening her voice. "It's time we take this further." Dr. Monroe visited Hope Haven the following week. She was a sharp, confident woman whose presence commanded attention. The tour she took with Amy and Laura showcased the therapy rooms, communal spaces, and the sensory garden where patients often found moments of peace. Dr. Monroe nodded approvingly. "You've built more than a rehabilitation center, Amy. You've built a community." Amy smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It started as a personal journey, but it's become something much bigger." Over coffee in the sunlit atrium, they discussed the logistics of opening another center in the nearby town of Clearwater, a community that lacked adequate rehabilitative care. Dr. Monroe promised to introduce Amy to potential donors and partners. Rachel, who sat in on the meeting, whispered to Amy as Dr. Monroe left, "This is going to be huge." Amy nodded, feeling the familiar rush of excitement that came with a new challenge. The prospect of opening a second center brought a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The original Hope Haven was thriving, but expanding meant more responsibilities, more oversight, and more opportunities for things to go wrong. Amy shared her concerns with Ben one evening as they walked through the town park, the cool breeze carrying the scent of pine. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm pushing too far. Too fast," Amy admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Ben paused, looking at her with the steady patience she had come to rely on. "Amy, if anyone can do this, it's you. You've turned doubt into hope before, and you'll do it again." She squeezed his hand, finding comfort in his certainty. "Then I guess it's time to take that leap." With Dr. Monroe's connections, Amy met with several local business owners and philanthropists who were interested in supporting the new Hope Haven. Each meeting brought its own set of challenges: questions about sustainability, staffing, and maintaining the center's core values. Rachel spearheaded the organizational side, compiling data that showcased the original center's success. Laura reached out to therapists and nurses willing to relocate or travel part-time to the new site, ensuring a strong foundation of skilled staff. Ben, ever supportive, offered to oversee the design and construction of the new center. "I'll make sure it's as welcoming and functional as this one," he promised. Amy felt a surge of gratitude. "It wouldn't be the same without you." Amy and Rachel visited Clearwater to meet with local leaders and residents. The town had a quiet charm, but the need for a rehabilitation center was clear. Amy stood in the empty lot where the new Hope Haven would rise, envisioning the rooms, therapy spaces, and the laughter that would fill the halls. At a community meeting that evening, Amy presented her vision. Hope Haven isn't just a place for healing. It's a place where people find strength they didn't know they had. And with your support, we can bring that hope here. Applause filled the room, and Amy felt the familiar thrum of possibility. A woman approached afterward, her eyes glistening. "My husband had a stroke 2 years ago. We've needed something like this for so long." "Thank you." Amy's smile was genuine, a reflection of the hope she saw mirrored back in the woman's eyes. Construction began soon after, with Ben at the helm and local workers joining the project. The hustle of cranes and trucks filled the empty lot, transforming it into a place that would soon offer hope and healing. Amy visited frequently, meeting with the builders and watching as the skeleton of the new center took shape. One afternoon, as she walked through the half-finished framework with Ben, he gestured to the view of the hills beyond. "They'll have this to look at while they work to get better. Sometimes, just knowing there's something beautiful beyond these walls helps." Amy nodded, her eyes misting. "You always know what to say." A few months into construction, an issue with funding arose when one of the key donors experienced financial setbacks and withdrew part of their contribution. The news hit hard, sending ripples of concern through the team. Rachel called an emergency meeting, and the air in the conference room was thick with worry. "We need to fill this gap, and fast," Rachel said, looking at the spreadsheet in front of her. "If we don't, we're looking at major delays." Amy felt the weight of the challenge pressed down on her. "What if we reach out to individual community members and host another showcase like we did before? We've seen that people believe in this mission." The team agreed, and plans for a new community fundraiser began to take shape. The event was held under strings of lights in Clearwater's main park. Volunteers set up booths, local musicians performed, and patients from the original Hope Haven shared stories that brought smiles and tears to the gathered crowd. Rachel managed the logistics, ensuring everything ran smoothly, while Laura offered medical advice at a wellness booth. Amy took the stage, the glow of lanterns reflecting in her eyes. "We are not just building a center. We are building a future where hope is accessible to everyone." The night was a success, bringing in enough donations to bridge the funding gap. As Amy stood surrounded by friends, patients, and supporters, she felt the unyielding bond of community, a reminder that even in moments of doubt, there was always a way forward. As construction neared completion, Amy found moments of quiet reflection. Sitting in the newly built community room, she felt the echoes of the past. Her accident, the hospital room, Mark's departure, but they no longer brought pain. Instead, they were reminders of the path she had walked to get here, surrounded by a team that had become her family. Ben walked in, his work boots leaving light dust on the polished floor. "Thinking about the journey?" he asked, sliding into the seat next to her. Amy smiled, the past no longer a shadow but a story that had led her to this moment. "Yeah," and realizing that it's just the beginning. Hope Haven Clearwater opened its doors on a crisp fall morning, with the smell of rain in the air and leaves crunching underfoot. Amy stood with Rachel, Laura, and Ben, watching the first patients walk in. There were young and old faces alike, each carrying stories of struggle and hope. Dr. Monroe joined them for the inauguration, standing tall and proud as she delivered her remarks. Hope Haven is more than just a center. It's a testament to what people can achieve when they come together with a shared purpose. Amy's heart swelled as she greeted each new patient, including a teenage girl named Mia, who had been in an accident similar to hers. When Amy looked into Mia's eyes, she saw herself, scared but determined, and promised to be the support that she once needed. Running 2 centers proved to be more challenging than Amy had anticipated. Balancing her time between Clearwater and the original Hope Haven stretched her thin. Meetings were back-to-back, and administrative work piled up. Rachel noticed the toll it was taking and intervened. "Amy, we need more support staff. You can't do everything." Amy sighed, pushing her hair out of her face. "I know, but hiring new people, training them, it's more time we don't have." Laura chimed in, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "It's better to invest that time now than to burn out later. We'll divide the workload and handle training. Trust us." The decision to bring in new staff was tough but necessary. Amy felt a mix of relief and anxiety as she delegated responsibilities, learning that leading didn't always mean doing everything herself. Rachel's skills as an organizer became invaluable. She stepped up as operations manager, managing staff training and coordinating activities between the two centers. Her quick thinking and warm personality made her a natural leader. One day, after a particularly long strategy session, Amy pulled Rachel aside. "I couldn't do this without you, you know." Rachel grinned. "Good thing you don't have to." The two shared a laugh, a rare moment of lightness amid the whirlwind of their responsibilities. Rachel's leadership allowed Amy to focus on the bigger picture: outreach programs, partnerships, and expanding Hope Haven's influence beyond their immediate reach. The success of Hope Haven caught the attention of a national rehabilitation network. Representatives reached out to Amy with an offer to collaborate, suggesting that the centers become part of a larger initiative that could provide additional funding and resources. Amy, Rachel, and Laura met to discuss the offer. "This could mean more facilities, more support for our patients, and even research opportunities," Laura said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "But it also means aligning with an organization that may have its own agenda," Rachel cautioned. Amy thought for a moment, tapping her pen against her notebook. "We need to ensure that any partnership honors what Hope Haven stands for. We've built this with heart, and I won't compromise that." Negotiations began, marked by long nights and careful discussions. Ben, always a steadying force, reminded Amy to trust her instincts. "You started this for the right reasons. Don't let anyone steer you away from that." Amy's relationship with Ben continued to grow, but managing two centers and the new partnership talks left little time for them. One evening, Ben suggested a break. "Let's take a day, just you and me. No phones, no meetings, just time to breathe." Amy hesitated, guilt gnawing at her. "There's so much to do, Ben. I can't just step away." He took her hand, his gaze earnest. "You need this, Amy. We need this." Reluctantly, she agreed. They spent the day at the nearby lake, watching the sun reflect off the water and walking along the shore. Amy felt the tension melt away, replaced by a sense of grounding she hadn't realized she'd lost. "I almost forgot what this feels like," she admitted, leaning against him. Ben kissed the top of her head. "You give so much to everyone else. Don't forget to give yourself a little grace." Just as things began to settle, Amy received an urgent call. A patient at the Clearwater Center, an elderly man named Henry who had come for stroke rehabilitation, had suffered a medical emergency. The news sent Amy racing to Clearwater, where Laura and the medical team were already working to stabilize him. The crisis was a stark reminder of how unpredictable their work could be. Amy spent the next few days at the center, checking on Henry's progress and reassuring staff and patients alike. Rachel found her late one night in the empty waiting room. "He's stable now, Amy. You should get some rest." Amy nodded, exhaustion pulling at her. I want them all to be okay." "They're better because of you," Rachel said softly. "But you're not alone in this. We're a team." Henry's recovery was slow but steady, and his family's gratitude was boundless. The experience reminded Amy of why she started Hope Haven: to provide not just treatment, but a safety net of support and care. One evening, as the sun set over Clearwater, Amy gathered her team. "I know the work we do is hard, and the days can be long, but every challenge we face together, and every life we touch is a reminder that what we're doing matters." The applause was heartfelt, and as she looked around at the faces of her team, Amy felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Hope Haven wasn't just her legacy, it was theirs. The first anniversary of Hope Haven Clearwater approached, and the team planned a celebration to honor the milestone. Patients and their families were invited, as were community leaders and volunteers who had contributed to the center's growth. The day was filled with speeches, music, and testimonials. Mia, the teenager Amy had met on opening day, spoke about her progress. "I didn't think I could ever be more than what happened to me," she said, her voice trembling. "But this place showed me that I could." Tears stung Amy's eyes as the crowd erupted in applause. She shared a look with Rachel and Laura, their expressions reflecting the same pride she felt. As the evening wound down, Ben stood by her side, watching the crowd. "Look at what you've done, Amy. Look at what we've all done." She leaned against him, the noise of the celebration wrapping around them like a warm blanket. "It feels like just the beginning." With the success of Clearwater, Dr. Monroe suggested hosting a national conference on community-based rehabilitation, featuring Hope Haven as a model. The idea was ambitious, but Amy embraced it, seeing it as an opportunity to share what they had learned and inspire others. Rachel took charge of the logistics, while Laura prepared to lead workshops. Amy spent her days planning keynote speeches and connecting with professionals across the country. The conference drew interest from rehabilitation centers, medical professionals, and community leaders nationwide. It was a chance to solidify Hope Haven's place as a leader in holistic rehabilitation. The day of the conference arrived, and the venue buzzed with anticipation. Amy stood backstage, going over her notes. Ben squeezed her hand for support. "You're going to be amazing." Her speech outlined the journey of Hope Haven, from an idea sketched in a journal to a thriving network that had changed countless lives. Rehabilitation isn't just about physical recovery. It's about rebuilding hope, finding purpose, and creating a community that lifts each other up. The room erupted in applause, and Amy felt a swell of pride. As she looked out at the sea of faces, she realized that Hope Haven's impact had far exceeded her original vision. It was no longer just her story. It belonged to everyone who had believed in the power of hope and resilience. Following the successful national conference, Amy returned to Hope Haven Clearwater. Greeted by familiar faces and the laughter of patients in the therapy rooms, the conference had sparked interest from medical professionals and rehabilitation advocates from across the country. Emails poured in with invitations for collaborations, interviews, and potential partnerships. One email stood out. An invitation from a European organization that wanted Amy to speak about building community-centric rehabilitation models. The idea of traveling and sharing her journey internationally thrilled her, but it also presented new challenges. Rachel brought coffee into Amy's office as they sifted through the emails. "Looks like we're not just local heroes anymore," she said with a grin. Amy nodded, the weight of their success pressing on her chest like a tangible thing. "It's exciting, but it's also a lot. I don't want to lose sight of why we started." "Then don't," Rachel said simply. "We grow, but we stay true." As Amy prepared for her European speaking tour, she felt a blend of excitement and anxiety. Ben helped her pack, his hands folding clothes with practiced care. "You're going to do great. They're going to see what we all see in you," he said, pausing to meet her eyes. Amy smiled, but worry creased her brow. "I just don't want to be away too long. The centers need me." "They do, but they also need the opportunities this brings. You've built a team that can handle things. Trust them." Laura and Rachel promised to keep everything running smoothly during her absence, and Amy's departure was met with cheers and good luck signs hastily painted by patients. Amy's speech at the European Summit was met with standing ovations. She shared stories of patients like Jamie and Mia, tales that resonated with the crowd and put a human face to the concept of holistic rehabilitation. People lined up afterward to speak to her, each conversation reinforcing the impact of what she had built. During a quiet moment, she received a text from Ben. "We're all proud of you. Come back soon." She smiled, feeling the connection despite the distance. The European tour led to new partnerships, including a proposal to create a sister center in Italy, which would be modeled after Hope Haven. It was a testament to the universal need for community and healing, and Amy felt both humbled and motivated by the possibility. While Amy was abroad, an issue arose at the Clearwater Center. An equipment malfunction led to a brief closure of one of the therapy rooms, causing delays and patient frustrations. Rachel called Amy, keeping her updated on their efforts to fix it. "We're on it, but some patients are upset. It's a logistical headache. Amy's stomach nodded as she listened. I wish I were there, she admitted, guilt gnawing at her. You trained us for this, Rachel assured her. We'll handle it, just like you would. Amy spent that evening on video calls with Laura and Rachel, brainstorming solutions. The experience reminded her that growth came with its share of challenges, and trust was as vital as leadership. The day Amy returned from Europe, the air was cool, and autumn leaves scattered across the road as she drove to the original Hope Haven. Ben was waiting, leaning against the porch with a grin. How's our international celebrity? Amy laughed, the tension she had carried for weeks finally lifting. Exhausted but happy to be back. They spent the evening at Rachel's house, where Laura joined them for a small welcome-back dinner. Stories of Europe mingled with updates on the centers, laughter filling the room like a salve. Next time we're going with you, Rachel teased. I want to see if European conferences have better snacks. The weeks following Amy's return were a whirlwind. New patient intake numbers surged after the European press coverage, leading to longer waiting lists and strained resources. The centers needed more staff, more funding, and more space. Amy called a team meeting to brainstorm solutions. We could start a mentorship program, Laura suggested. Train people from the community to support patients and help with basic care. That's a great idea, Rachel said, jotting notes. And we could apply for grants focused on community health programs. The team divided responsibilities, each person focusing on different aspects to expand capacity while maintaining the quality of care. The next few months were marked by long days and problem-solving, but also by a renewed sense of purpose. The mentorship program launched with a group of volunteers from the community, including former patients and their families. It was an immediate success, easing the workload on staff and creating a deeper sense of connection among patients. Mia, now more confident and mobile, became one of the first mentors, guiding new patients through their first days at Hope Haven. Watching Mia coach others was a full-circle moment for Amy. It was proof that Hope Haven had not only healed, but also empowered people to give back. Amy met with Mia one afternoon, watching her encourage a nervous new arrival. You're doing amazing work, Mia, Amy said, pride in her voice. Mia smiled, a look of gratitude and determination in her eyes. I learned from the best. Amy's personal life blossomed amid the professional chaos. Ben proposed one quiet evening as they walked through the garden at Hope Haven Clearwater, the moon casting a silver glow over the flowers. He knelt down, producing a small, simple ring. I've watched you turn pain into hope, not just for yourself, but for so many others. I want to be by your side through all of it, Amy. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. Yes, Ben. 1,000 times yes. The news spread quickly, adding to the sense of community celebration that seemed to envelop Hope Haven. Patients, staff, and even visitors offered congratulations, proving that Amy's story of resilience was shared by all who came into contact with her. With the mentorship program thriving and new grants secured, the centers gained a financial cushion that allowed them to expand services without sacrificing quality. Rachel and Laura proposed creating a specialized wing for pediatric rehabilitation, a service that was sorely needed but hadn't been possible due to space constraints. Let's do it, Amy said, the decision made easier by their recent successes. If we can help kids regain their strength and confidence, we're fulfilling our mission. Ben volunteered to lead the construction project, integrating new designs that would make the space both child-friendly and practical. The team dove into planning, their excitement palpable as they worked late into the evenings. The opening of the pediatric wing brought families from surrounding towns who had heard of Hope Haven's success. The space was filled with murals, colorful therapy equipment, and cheerful music. Laura led the medical team with Rachel managing logistics, ensuring that the opening week went smoothly. One afternoon, a young boy named Lucas, who had been born with a condition limiting his mobility, took his first independent steps during a session. His parents wept as they watched, the room erupting in cheers. Amy stood by, tears streaming down her face as she remembered her own struggles and triumphs. We're changing lives, Ben whispered, his arm around her. Amy nodded, the weight of the moment pressing into her heart. And we're just getting started. Just as everything seemed to be running smoothly, Amy received an unexpected visitor at the Clearwater Center. It was Mark, her ex-husband, looking older but composed. "I read about you in the news," he said, shifting awkwardly. "I wanted to see it for myself." Amy's initial reaction was guarded, old wounds flaring up. "Why now, Mark?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wanted to apologize for what I did back then. You've done incredible things, Amy. I'm genuinely proud of you." The conversation, though brief, offered a sense of closure. As Mark left, Amy felt lighter, the last vestiges of her past settling into a place that no longer hurt. After Mark's visit, Amy felt a renewed sense of clarity. She met with Rachel, Laura, and Ben to discuss the future, envisioning further expansion that included more outreach programs and tele-rehabilitation services for those who couldn't visit the centers. "We're not just a rehabilitation center anymore," Rachel said, excitement coloring her tone. "We're becoming a movement." Laura smiled, adding, "And with tele-rehabilitation, we can reach people beyond our towns." "This is big, Amy." Amy nodded, a grin spreading across her face. "Then let's make it happen." The tele-rehabilitation program rolled out within months, bringing Hope Haven services to rural areas and communities where in-person visits weren't possible. It was an immediate success, with patients sending messages of thanks and videos of their progress. Amy sat in her office late one night, reviewing patient stories that had come in through the online platform. Each story reminded her of why she had started this journey. The world outside was quiet, but inside her, hope thrummed like a heartbeat. Hope Haven's tele-rehabilitation program expanded faster than anticipated, attracting attention from healthcare providers and rehabilitation centers nationwide. Amy found herself busier than ever, coordinating training for remote therapists and developing new ways to keep the program accessible and user-friendly. One day, Rachel burst into Amy's office, excitement lighting up her face. "We've just been invited to present our tele-rehabilitation model at the National Health Summit." Amy's heart fluttered at the news. "This is huge, Rachel. It could change everything for us, and for people who can't access in-person care." As they shared a smile, the reality of what Hope Haven had become settled into Amy's chest like a warm, reassuring weight. What started as a seed of an idea in her darkest hours had grown into something that touched lives far beyond their small community. With new opportunities came the need for more specialized staff. Laura proposed hiring additional physical and occupational therapists to keep up with demand. Interviews were held over weeks, with Rachel overseeing the process to ensure they found people who shared the center's values. One new hire stood out: Dr. Eric Mason, a young, passionate therapist with a knack for technology. "I've been following Hope Haven's work since I was in school," he told Amy during his interview. "It's what inspired me to specialize in community-based rehabilitation." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Amy knew he would be a perfect fit for their growing team. With growth came complications. The increased scale of operations brought financial strain despite the grants and donations. Rachel worked tirelessly on funding applications, while Amy scheduled back-to-back meetings with potential sponsors. Ben noticed the tension mounting. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, he said, "You've done incredible things, Amy. But don't forget why you started this. You need to protect that passion, even when it gets hard." Amy nodded, taking a sip of her tea. "Sometimes it feels like the bigger we get, the more we risk losing what made Hope Haven special." "Then we make sure that doesn't happen," Ben said, squeezing her hand. "Together." One afternoon, Jamie, the boy who had been one of Hope Haven's first patients, walked into the center. Now a teenager, he stood taller, his once uncertain gait steady and confident. "I wanted to stop by and say thank you," Jamie said, eyes bright. "I'm starting college next year, and I couldn't have done it without you and everyone here." Amy's throat tightened as she hugged him. Moments like these reminded her that Hope Haven's true success was measured not just in numbers or accolades, but in the lives changed. The day of the National Health Summit arrived. Amy, Laura, and Dr. Eric Mason presented Hope Haven's model to a packed auditorium. They spoke about the impact of community-based rehabilitation, the success of their mentorship program, and how tele-rehabilitation had reached patients who would otherwise be overlooked. Questions from the audience ranged from logistics to potential collaboration. Amy's heart swelled with pride as she fielded each one, supported by her capable team. Afterward, a representative from a large medical foundation approached Amy. "We'd like to help fund your telerehabilitation program on a larger scale," he said. "What you're doing is exactly what the field needs." Amy exchanged looks with Laura and Dr. Mason, knowing this would be a game-changer. Back at Hope Haven, the buzz from the summit lingered. The promise of new funding allowed them to expand their telerehabilitation services and enhance their facilities. The pediatric wing in Clearwater became a hub for innovation, drawing families from across the state. Rachel suggested a new community outreach program focused on preventative care and early intervention for children. "We can help kids before they even need intensive rehabilitation," she said, eyes glinting with excitement. Amy grinned, feeling that familiar rush of possibility. "Let's do it." Hope isn't just about recovery. It's about building a life where challenges don't stop you. Years passed, and Hope Haven continued to grow, expanding its services, mentoring new leaders, and inspiring rehabilitation centers across the globe to adopt its model. Amy took on more of an advisory role, traveling less but always staying connected to the centers and their progress. On the 5th anniversary of the first Hope Haven, a gala was held in their town. The community gathered, sharing stories, laughter, and memories. Patients like Mia, now a confident young woman, and Jamie, visiting from college, stood as symbols of resilience. Amy looked out over the crowd, feeling Ben's arm around her shoulders and Rachel's knowing smile from across the room. The journey had been full of challenges, triumphs, and moments that tested every ounce of her strength. But it had all been worth it. Hope Haven was more than a place. It was a testament to the power of community, the courage to start over, and the belief that hope, once found, could light the path forward for everyone. A few months after the 5th anniversary gala, Hope Haven welcomed a new patient named Ella, a 17-year-old who had been injured in a competitive gymnastics accident. The injury left her paralyzed from the waist down, shattering her Olympic dreams. Ella arrived with her parents, both visibly exhausted from months of hospital stays and uncertainty. Amy met them in the bright reception area of the Clearwater Center. "Welcome, Ella," she said warmly. "We're here to help you navigate this step by step." Ella looked at Amy with a mix of hope and defiance. "I don't want to just get better," she said. "I want to feel like myself again." That statement struck a chord with Amy, who remembered her own struggle to reclaim a sense of identity after her accident. She knew Ella's journey would be as much emotional as physical. Ella's therapy sessions were difficult at first. She was used to pushing her body to its limits, and the slow pace of rehabilitation tested her patience. Frustration crept in, especially during group sessions where other patients seemed to be making faster progress. One day, as Ella sat in the common room, hands clenched into fists, Mia approached her with a soft smile. "You know, I used to hate how slow everything felt too," Mia said, pulling up a chair. "But I found that focusing on what I could do instead of what I couldn't made all the difference." Ella softened, seeing Mia's confidence as both a challenge and an inspiration. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. Mia gestured to a piano tucked in the corner of the room. "I started playing again. It wasn't the same as before, but it gave me a piece of myself back." That evening, Ella wheeled herself over to the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant at first. Slowly, she pressed a few notes, and then a melody, a song she'd practiced as a child, filled the room. Heads turned, and soft applause followed when she finished. Amy, who had watched from the hallway, felt a rush of emotion. She approached Ella, eyes glistening. "That was beautiful." Music has a way of reminding us who we are. Encouraged, Ella began incorporating piano practice into her routine. Soon, other patients gathered for impromptu concerts, finding solace in the music. The sessions turned into a weekly tradition called Hope Harmonies, where patients shared songs, poetry, and stories. The Hope Harmonies evenings became a cherished event. Amy watched as the room transformed every week, not just into a place of healing but one of joy and camaraderie. People who once felt defined by their limitations found their voices again through music and art. Rachel, always brimming with ideas, suggested creating a music therapy program as a permanent part of Hope Haven's services. "It's more than just rehabilitation, Amy. It's rediscovery," she said. Amy agreed, seeing the way Ella's spirit had been lifted. "This is what Hope Haven is about, finding new ways to thrive, not just survive." Ella's progress in physical therapy improved as her confidence grew. By the time she was ready to leave Hope Haven, she had decided on a new dream: to study music therapy in college and help others find their way back to themselves through music. On her last day, she performed a final song, surrounded by friends and family. "Thank you, everyone, for showing me that even when one dream ends, another can begin," Ella said, tears in her eyes. As Amy and Mia embraced Ella, the sense of unity and shared resilience filled the room. Hope Haven continued to be a place where people didn't just rebuild their bodies, but found the strength to rebuild their lives. One day, a man named Thomas appeared at the reception desk of the original Hope Haven Center. He was in his late 30s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. "I'd like to volunteer," he said, nervously tugging at the hem of his sweater. "I have some experience with carpentry and organizing activities." Laura, who handled volunteer applications, raised an eyebrow. "We can always use more hands, but what brought you here?" Thomas hesitated before answering. "I've been looking for a way to give back. My brother was in an accident years ago. He didn't have a place like this, and I think it could have changed things for him." Touched by his sincerity, Laura nodded. "Welcome to Hope Haven, Thomas." Thomas settled into his role, repairing broken chairs, building custom therapy tools, and assisting with group activities. His presence was quiet but steady, and patients grew to trust him. He had a way of making people feel heard, whether he was adjusting equipment or simply listening to their stories. Amy first met Thomas while he was fixing a handrail in one of the common rooms. "You're the new volunteer everyone's talking about," she said with a warm smile. "Guilty," Thomas replied, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "I just want to help, even in small ways." Amy sensed there was more behind his words but didn't press. She knew that Hope Haven often attracted people who needed healing of their own, even if they weren't patients. One evening, Thomas joined a Hope Harmonies session. Ella, now visiting as a guest mentor, played a lively tune on the piano while patients clapped along. When the music ended, Thomas cleared his throat. "Mind if I share something?" The room quieted as he recited a poem about resilience and loss, each word layered with emotion. When he finished, the silence hung for a moment before being broken by applause. Amy's heart ached as she saw the glisten of tears in his eyes. Afterward, Amy approached him. "That was beautiful. You've experienced a lot, haven't you?" Thomas nodded, his gaze distant. "Losing my brother changed me. But seeing this place, it's helping me too." With Thomas's carpentry skills, Rachel suggested a new project: a sensory garden where patients could engage their senses through touch, smell, and sound. Thomas's eyes lit up at the idea. "I'd love to build that." Patients and volunteers joined in, planting flowers with vibrant scents, arranging smooth stones, and hanging wind chimes that filled the garden with soft music. The project took weeks, with everyone pitching in during their free time. Amy often watched from her office, moved by the teamwork and joy it sparked. The garden was completed just in time for spring, a burst of color and life that seemed to embody the spirit of Hope Haven. On the first day the sensory garden opened, patients and staff gathered outside. The wind carried the sweet scent of lavender and the soft notes of the wind chimes. Mia helped guide a patient through the path, pointing out the different plants and textures. Thomas stood at the edge of the garden, taking in the scene with a look of quiet satisfaction. Amy joined him, touched by the peaceful scene. "You made this possible, Thomas," she said. "I think this place is healing more than just the patients," he admitted, a small smile breaking through. "It's reminding me that hope can grow again, even after loss." Amy nodded, feeling the truth of his words sink in. That's what Hope Haven has always been about. If you enjoyed this story about resilience, community, and the power of hope, don't forget to give this post a like. Share it with friends who might find it inspiring, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories that touch on themes of overcoming challenges and finding strength in unity. And remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our latest stories. Together we can continue to spread hope and positivity. See you in the next story.